So my video yesterday on the Freehold answers and concerns got a lot of people talking in my comments, and a good number of people have views that differ from mine, which is perfectly fine. And in fact, I encourage different comments and people to disagree with me, because I could be wrong for sure. I'm wrong plenty of times. And also it just gets me thinking more and gets me into more of an open state of mind when I get disagreements in my comments. So I'm going to go through some of these and we're going to kind of talk about these a little bit. Jeff Robinson says it's not easy to run and maintain mega guilds. And I agree with that. If you're able to coordinate and keep high functioning guild together, there should be benefits. I agree with that. Drama, infighting, and complacency often destroy these guilds. They die and make room for newer, more ambitious ones. For the most part, I agree with all these things. However, there are some mega guilds that have been around in some games like EVE Online and Albion Online for years and years. And how do they maintain those high numbers? They just mass invite. They have people leave all the time. They invite more people than people leave. And so what happens is they're just a big, huge Zerg guild, and they still dominate just by sheer numbers alone. For example, if you just search for biggest guilds in MMO history, you'll probably find this post. Goon Swarm was an EVE Online guild, had tens of thousands of people. They still do. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Arch Alliance in Albion Online is massive and still exists. So people are saying 13,000 all the way up to maybe 20,000 for Arch. Goon Swarm 10k plus. What is Arch? The Roman groups, blah, blah, blah. A large alliance that accepts basically anyone, has a reputation for being bad at the game, that's the other thing about these mass invite guilds. Usually not the best players, but it doesn't matter. This is the problem, is it doesn't matter because they just have so many players. So they're still around. They've been around a long time, Arch Guild. And then here is the EVE Online, the largest alliances. Goon Swarm is still there, still number one. And look at some of these others that are just absolutely massive as well. You have to go down pretty far before you get to one that has less than 1,000 members. If you look at this chart of Goon Swarm, they are still growing members. So I'm sure they have people drop off and leave, but more people are joining than leaving. So that, my friends, is proof that even uncoordinated guilds, they can continue to grow just by inviting everyone that wants in. And while that's proof that large guilds can succeed and they can exist without falling apart, it doesn't necessarily tell us much about what the percentage chance is of these guilds succeeding. I'd be willing to bet that large guilds have a very, very high failure rate. But I'd definitely be curious to know if that percentage is different than smaller guilds. And we'll never know that, because the problem with MMOs is that kind of information is really hard to come by a lot of times. And I've tried to find information like that in the past on MMOs, and it's just not out. It's hard enough to find the player base size of MMOs over time. WoW, when they used to release that information, is about the only one you can find real accurate information on player numbers, let alone like guild information and things like that. That stuff is just, unless somebody has compiled it out there, it just doesn't exist. But off of the top of my head, based on my experience, I feel like most Zerg guilds fall apart at a pretty high percentage. But there are success stories out there as well. And I think it's all comes down to, can they just out-recruit the attrition rate? That's really what it comes down to once they get to a certain size. Caravans are ways that small groups can go after the bigger guilds. Yeah, I do agree with that. Because if they're an uncoordinated Zerg guild, they may not have the proper amount of escorts, or the escorts for these caravans might not be the best players, or maybe they didn't get a good group composition for the caravan escorts. So a smaller, well-organized guild could disrupt their supply lines, which could starve their node of supplies, especially if they're trying to defend for a siege, or they're trying to level up their node, or what have you. So yes, there are mechanics in the game that support the smaller guilds for sure. Ashes is massive. I got this comment several times. Ashes is a gigantic map, and I mentioned that in the video that will probably limit the large Zerg guilds to some extent as well. Getting out 2P, join a large guild. Yeah, I mean, the way it's shaping up, that's kind of what I think you might have to do. But the problem with that is, everybody wants to be in a large guild. A lot of these large guilds, there's a fair amount of toxicity in them, and there's not necessarily the best leadership. There's a lot of drama. You don't know very many people. You know 10% of the people at most. And so it's kind of antisocial in a way, because you just don't know half the people, and you have trouble having conversations with people because you don't even know them. In the smaller guilds, you tend to know people a lot better. It's more of a family type environment. And a lot of times you get to become a more cohesive and organized group. And honestly, I think a lot of times the smaller guilds have better players. They might not have the best geared players, they might not control a lot of the better content, but in terms of unit cohesion and how well groups work together, I think that is where they can excel. And somebody mentioned the smaller guild bonuses that could be a thing. 50% contribution bonus to patron status for the nodes for smaller guilds. Yeah, something like that. Sure, that would absolutely kind of balance things out. But then the large guilds, like I said, could be encouraged to break off to smaller guilds to offset that. But then the opportunities for those guilds to fall apart goes up. So I really hope that with the guild skill tree, which we have not seen yet, I hope that for the smaller guilds, there's pretty massive buffs, and I think that will help a lot. Darkfall, the Giant Zerg guild, never lasts more than a few months. Yeah, in some games it just doesn't work very well, but in other games like EVE Online that have been around for a long time, I think eventually in Darkfall, if it would have had enough success and if people would have stuck around in the game, I think you might have seen a big Zerg guild eventually form, just like in EVE Online, but we don't know. Lineker posted, and he was just on Vladis's 1v1 podcast. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. I'll link it. He runs a very large guild, so you can kind of see where his perspective is, but he's not seeing the exact issue. As mentioned, similar to literally every other open world PvP MMO, massive guilds and ashes will indeed snowball and dominate the region, but how is that an issue? It's not the developer's job to bring equality. If a smaller guild can't compete against a larger guild, they should recruit more, make alliances, group up. Why would you be concerned about what is a main feature of these sandboxy games? Player agency. The game gives everyone the same playing field. If some players choose to make friends and become a large organization, why would the developer need to fuck up their progression, cap the shit out of their achievements to give opportunity to players that refuse to do the same? To that, I would say, for me, I think the issue is you could be in a smaller guild and you could put more time into the game, you could be more skilled at the game, and you could not get freeholds, and you could not have as much gear or as good of gear as the large guilds, simply because you're in a smaller guild. It's not that you didn't put the same time in, it's not that you maybe even didn't put more time in, it's not that you're not even better at the game than they are, it's that you simply don't like to join the large guilds for the reasons I mentioned above. You don't know everybody, there's drama, there's toxicity, and so for me, that's where that comes from. Now, are there large guilds that don't have those issues? For sure, there definitely are. And for me, I've never really been interested in large guilds, but for Ashes, I'm considering joining one of the larger guilds just because of the way this game is shaping up. I think that's might be what you have to do. But then when you do that, you're excluding all the players that do not want to join those large guilds. And then at the end, all the small guilds end up leaving, or they get absorbed by the large guilds, and the people that don't want to be in the large guilds, what do? Maybe they quit the game. And I don't think you can survive on a game that only caters to large guilds. That's my view. Could be wrong. We don't know yet. The game doesn't exist yet. 50k will not be on one server, in my opinion. Yeah, I think that number is old, and we don't know yet. That could change. That's what they're aiming for, and we don't know if they'll actually get to that number. If that number is much lower, that changes the dynamics of all of this stuff quite a bit, right? The world is huge. Yes. So those are all kind of the comments that I thought were helpful and added to the conversation. And let me know your guys' thoughts. I might do some more of these in the future. I try not to do too many controversial videos. I try for the most part to do positive videos, but this one had some negative connotations, but hopefully not too negative. With that, guys, I'll be in my Discord probably for most of the rest of the day if you want to come in there and tell me why I'm wrong or whatever you'd like to do. And I'm thinking about trying to figure out a way to do some sort of Ashes of Creation podcast maybe once a week over on my Twitch. If I can figure out the logistics of making it work with my busy schedule, maybe I will do that. I've tried to commit to streaming schedules in the past and it's just never worked. With that, guys, I'll see you in the next video.